Guys, Derek here at the Community Brew Shop. I'm up in the brew house here at the Picaroons General Store in St. John, New Brunswick. I just want to invite you guys to the release of our next beer that we've collaborated here with Picaroons General Store. They've been kind enough to let us brew on their big system here, a couple of home brewers, Christian and I. We made a Belgian Dubbel that we're going to call Trinity Abbey, and we're happy to release it here on Friday. We're going to have probably some homebrew supplies on site. We may even brew the beer. And we'll have our special foam control tap installed to make sure we have the proper carbonation. So this beer was made as traditionally as possible as we could, so you stay tuned. We'll talk more about the ingredients here, but we'd like to see you Friday on March 4th. If you can join us after work, this is the perfect beer for when you're done your long work week. Okay, we'll see you there. Cheers. Okay, so just to talk a little bit more about some of the ingredients that went into this beer. This beer is going to end up being a 7.7% ABV. So the first thing, obviously, that goes into the beer is water. So we actually got the St. John City water profile, and we tailored it to match something more like you would find in Antwerp, Belgium. So what that meant for us, usually when you're home brewing, you make small adjustments, but here we had to make quite a large adjustment. But what we actually had to add was quite a bit more water hardness, which is one of the things that will make this beer a lot more balanced. The St. John City water source is actually fairly balanced. There's not a lot of mineral content either, because most of it comes from groundwater, whereas in Antwerp, Belgium, it's mostly well water, that kind of thing. So they have different water source. So we had to add also some calcium to it to make the beer just a little bit more balanced, and we want this the malt profile and the hops to kind of play nicely together instead of it being more hop forward or more malty. So with the water we had to make a few adjustments, and again we tailored it to the traditional style that you would find in Antwerp, Belgium. Hey guys, just wanted to talk a little bit more about the malt bill that we used for this beer, since this makes up a very large portion of the ingredients. Being a 7.7% beer, we had to add quite a bit of grist into this. So we started with a Pilsner malt from Germany, which is pretty traditional for a Belgian style. From there, we layered the base malts up with a Vienna and a Munich. So the Vienna is going to give it this nice caramely color. The Munich will also add some more roasty flavors to that. From there, we added in an Abbey malt, which it's a little more subtle than a dark malt, but it also adds honey and nut flavors to it, just to give it a little bit of an undertone. And then we topped it off with some Special B, which is quite a bit darker. That darker roasted malt will also add plum flavors, dried fruit flavors to this beer, which gives it that traditional Belgian taste. So that's kind of what we went for with this. And of course, with any Belgian style, we topped it off with traditional candy sugar that we brought in from Belgium. I don't know if you've seen some of our Instagram posts, but Christian had a picture of some of the rock sugar we brought in. So we used a white sugar, like a white candy rock sugar that we sell at the shop, and that brought the ABV up to about 7.7. So in total, the candy sugar we used was about 10%, which is about the average for most Belgian style breweries. So we're hoping you enjoy the beer. It is a heavy hitter as far as Belgian styles go, but it still has that light body. It's not super heavy like you would get with a stout or like a imperial beer, that kind of thing. But it still allows these flavors of the malt to kind of shine through. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about the hops that we added to this Belgian Dubbel. To keep it a traditional style, what we went with was the Tettinger hops, which actually come out of Germany, but they're a traditional style that are used in the Belgian beer world, I guess you could say, traditionally in ales and Abbey beers. So the Tettinger hop adds a little bit of spicy and earthy kind of notes to it, which are going to pair very nicely with the yeast characteristics that we added in as well. So we added in a 60-minute addition, which was fairly heavy to keep the beer clean, then give it a little bit of bitterness, and then we topped it off with a 15-minute addition, which will allow that spiciness, aromas to come through from the hops. So again, with the hops, just like the malt that we just talked about, the key is to balance it out. We didn't want to over-hop the beer so that the hops were the star of the show. The malt should still be a little bit more forward, but we found after tasting it, this beer isn't quite carbonated. We'll be carbonating it on Thursday, but we found that it has a nice kind of transition from the malt into the hops, finishing with a little bit of clean bitterness. And then from there, you can also taste some of the yeast characteristics. All right, so the final ingredient in the beer, of course, is the yeast. So once we have the wort, the hops, everything's boiled, it's cooled down. What we added to this this Belgian Dubbel was actually a product from escarpment yeasts. So this is very interesting, the way that we built up the yeast brink. Basically what we did is we took some homebrew pouches that I used at my house. We actually made a complete batch of starter beer. So we made a Belgian single without some of the darker malts, and then that Belgian single was then used to propagate some of the yeast from Escarpment Labs. So we brought that yeast in here to Picaroons from the shop, and we threw it in this big tank, and it took right off. So our process there took a little bit of time. It took about a week to build up the proper amount of yeast to brew this beer. But it had all the same ingredients, so as it goes in, it doesn't dilute any of the flavors or anything like that. So when we fermented this beer, it suggested to go between, I believe it was 19 and 25 degrees for fermentation. So what we did is we originally let it kind of build up to around 22 degrees, and we kind of let it settle out there, so it fermented fairly quickly, and it started to slow down. Once the fermentation was complete, we actually put this beer into a lagering phase, which will give it that nice clear, clean consistency that you see. A lot of times when you're a home brewer, that's the difference between, you know, taking your Belgian ale to the next level. Is a lot of times the Belgian like Abbey beers will go through basically a lagering phase that you would usually do with lagers. So we did that here at Picaroons to try to keep it more traditional. Right now the beer's sitting around 4 degrees. We started at 8 to cold crash it and allow some of the sediment to settle out. Now it's at 4, so it's sitting nice and cold. All the flavors are just kind of, you know, getting to know each other a little bit more. And on Thursday we're going to carbonate it, and then we'll serve it on tap. So hopefully we'll see you on Thursday, and I'll just give you one more little talk about the final process here when we're done. All right, so finally we'll just give you a kind of a what to expect video when you come in. If you can make it in on Friday to try this beer out, that'd be great. It'll be the kickoff to March break, which is nice, so you'll have all week to try it out. Again, we're at Picaroons General Store here, uptown St. John. It's our second collaboration with them. So if you're going to order this beer on tap, what you can expect, we'll go over the critical specs. So first, the ABV, the alcohol by volume is 7.7 on this. Again, this comes from the malt with the addition of the Belgian candy sugar to keep it more of a light-bodied, higher alcohol beer. So you might expect a little bit of a booziness to this. So you may get a little bit of that boozy smell to it, but it's not really present in the flavor. Next is your IBU, so the International Bitterness Unit, which talks about how many hops are added. And with the hops we use, the Temperature hops, we calculate it to be around 23 IBUs, which is a fairly balanced beer, especially with a more malty profile to it. So it should mainly be a balanced, I guess, beer on your palate. So you're not going to taste a lot of bitterness or a lot of maltiness. What you should taste is a smooth transition from the malt into the hops and then into bitterness. So you'll get that nice balanced flavor. And finally, the SRM, which is the color. It's around 18 SRM, and that was actually one of the trickier things we had to balance with the beer, with using things like Special B, which has a very high roasted character to it, but we still wanted to keep the Belgian flavors in it. So it's not a super dark beer like you would have like a stout or a porter, that kind of thing. It's a little bit below that. Keeps the malt a little bit restrained, but it still has those nice fruity flavors that will play well with the characteristics of the yeast that are, you know, have those fruity esters and some of that Belgian style characteristics you're becoming familiar with. So if you come in here on next week, I guess, starting on March 4th, what we're going to do here, actually, we're going to bring in a special tap, which is called a foam control faucet, because we're going to bump up the carbonation. We're actually going to push the limits of this system quite hard to try to get the carbonation up to around 3.2 volumes of carbonation. So what you'll find with that style of beer is it's going to have quite a thick head on it. This one here has not been carbonated yet. You'll see it's already a little bit foamy. But what you may expect for a pour is that you'll get a nice volume of beer in the bottom with a nice creamy head that stays, and you should get that nice Belgian lace that will cling to your glass as you drink it. So each sip you'll see a nice line in the foam that's been taken from your glass. So that's from all the malt and the and basically the water treatment that we've done to keep that foam, you know, on point. So we're hoping we can get that up to around 3.2 volumes, but we'll see what we can do on the system here. But either way, we're going to pour it like a traditional Belgian ale, and from there it should be pretty enjoyable. So beware of this. Again, it's 7.7. It's a great after work beer. I always describe this to people when they ask me about the style. It's kind of like your gateway beer into the Belgian flavor world, I guess. So when you talk about, you know, dry plum, or dry fruit flavors like plum, raisin, you get into honey. It's very delicate beer. It's going to have a nice delicate head, and the yeast, hops, and malt all play together quite nicely. So I hope you guys enjoy, and I hope to see you on Friday. Take care, and we'll see you then. Cheers.